Oh, there I am. I forgot the intro. The dogs came running in. Let's hit the intro, and then we'll come back. And there we are. Okay, that worked better that way. Afternoon. Happy Friday to everybody. Yeah, I got multiple buttons. I don't even know what some of them do. Now, he added so much stuff. Now I got to scroll and find things. So, there you go. Here we go. It's Friday. Drinks are up to the bobs. Hey, Glenn. Hey, Robert. Hey, everybody. Cool day today in Arizona. Better make sure my phone is silent, but or else we get those stupid calls. Cool day today in Arizona. It's only 58 out, and it's the top of the day heat, rolling in, blistering 58. But tomorrow's supposed to be down in the 30s, so it'll be a cool day. We're having a little bit of a cool front coming through, a little bit of rain, so it's nice. Nice however you look at it in any way. But yeah, we're not getting a winter freeze yet. Maybe tomorrow we'll have a winter freeze. So there we go. To all the bobs. Yes, to all the bobs. So rolling again, another Friday. Kind of word went out to everybody, talked to everybody this week. Things going in motion for various things. This is the season of Discovery Camp for Dawns of Arizona, where on every Friday for 6 Fridays we'll be working with 3rd and 4th graders, teach them gold panning, ranching, taking them hiking and that kind of stuff out of the Dawns base camp. So different schools come out and we take them out and do stuff with them. So that's kind of a neat thing, but that kind of eats up a lot of time. We opened the camp and got camp open and security at the camp and everything. So if you go out, be cautious and careful, because we do have security out there, and they'll be, what are you doing? Kind of keeping an eye on things, but we're definitely geared up for that. And then shortly following, as soon as Discovery Camp's over, will be the Treasure Hunt of the Year Awards in March. So we'll be pretty busy going into this spring. Still got to set the rendezvous date, but I have to set that and then get the permits into the Forestry Department, Forestry Service, and get that approved before I can announce it and make sure everything's good, which it should be. I think last year was my first year renewing and working on the permit process, and they should be good. I got nothing but good feedback, so everything should be good moving forward onto next year's rendezvous. That being said and done, we all watch a bit. I mean, most of us hopefully watched the show I was on. Maybe some of you just know me from YouTube. And I kind of always am supportive of the different programs, for better or worse. And last week we talked a little bit of some problems some places are having, or people in shows. This week, Elmer being found with bullet holes. This week it was Josh Gates, which I'm very confused, because I think he has 3 or 4 different shows, and it's hard. I can tell you one. He travels around the world. It's almost like it's a travel host show. I'm not quite sure it's not anything mysteries or something. Other times it's a little more of a mysteries type show where he's looking to find, the tomb of Genghis Khan. And then there's the show with the the two people that go out and investigate for him. He just sits in the office. And that was the one, they had that one on, was it the other night, and I watched it. And I don't usually give much of an overview of these shows. This one caught my eye. I usually sit and watch them. I always record them. I always watch them and let them run. Even if I'm not going to sit out and, clearly pay deep attention to them. Sometimes I'm like, looks clean and did a good job. I took a hike Sunday on Peralta. We'll be working on doing road work too, coming up here soon for some of the washouts. But I was kind of like, it was about the vulture mine, and I thought, well, that's cool. So I thought, I'll watch that one. It's an Arizona one, and it's something I'm very familiar with. I've been out to the Vulture City, Vulture Mine area a number of times. So I thought, okay, and I know they got their own distinct little mythology they like to throw in, but I thought it'll be cool. It's Arizona. Ghost Adventures had done one out there, which was a little semi-ridiculous, but I thought, okay, we'll see what Josh Gates' crew do. And theirs was about ghosts. It seems like they all want to do ghosts now. And they rode up on horses, and lo and behold, the other guy, I can't remember his name. It's Heather, and I can't remember the guy's name, who's been there the whole time. But anyways, he's missing because he had a baby, so they put Jack Osborne in. And I don't mind Jack Osborne. He's probably a nice guy. And he really seems to want to do all this paranormal stuff all the time. So I'm watching it going, okay. They meet with one of the guys that does the tours and who's there and all. And he tells them some stuff. They mention that Henry Wickenburg. They don't mention he died. It was ruled suicide, but people were suspicious that it could have been murder. They just say he died from a bullet hole in his head. They just gotta leave it flat for the show, which is kind of the whole show. They did that a lot of. They threw Jack Swilling under the bus there briefly later, but it was kind of funny because they immediately go into their ghost. Phil, Phil's that guy, and so Phil's missing. It's Jack Osborne. They're gonna go do their ghost hunting thing. Jack they put in the schoolhouse, which I don't think is open. It's in a different place than where you pull in and do the tour. The schoolhouse is around the corner down the road. I have pictures of the kids playing on the playground stuff. But he does the schoolhouse, and then Heather does the bordello. And Jack goes in. There's supposed to be this doll that if you carry it out, you'll be paralyzed and you can't move or breathe or something goes on. No, he doesn't. He picks it up and sets it on the ground, but he never, it's like, come on, you should just pick it up and walk out the door. See if something happens. At least have a guinea pig, At this point, I start becoming disappointed because I realize there's a cameraman, there's an audio guy, there's a producer probably with him at least. So there's at least 3 other people. And these shows like to play, even though you can tell the other camera's there, besides the static camera. They really like to play, there's no other cameraman, or try to make you feel that way. And I get the shows for entertainment, but it kind of bothered me through this episode. And so Jack does his stuff. He's walking around on this wood floor. He does that flashlight thing, which anybody can do it anywhere and make flashlights go on and off. And they do a lot of cut edits while he's talking, and they're going on and off. So it just kills any possibility of it being any type of evidence of anything, because you just realize it could have been 5 minutes since that, you don't know. And it's a hot cold thing with the batteries and the bulb in them, or even if they're LEDs, they warm up a little bit. But actually, I don't think they do use LEDs because they don't warm up, so they can't use those. But anyways, then it shoots to Heather in the bordello, and she's doing her little thing. And then the only interesting thing comes of this is because Heather's in the bordello, and I thought, wow, that's cool. This picture falls over, and it falls over like someone just went bang at it. It really goes over pretty hard. And I was like, wow. And the cameraman, if you've watched it, or if you watch it, because you can always go back in time with a DVR and watch them, he even shifts down. He kind of moves over suddenly to get it. And Heather's talking that the glass is there and there's no way it could have happened. Hey, everybody keep coming on in. Oh, aren't you bartending? Quality entertainment. Well, but the problem was, that's when the cameraman should have got up. They should have filmed. She should have been, at least you do see, you can tell the glass and this and that. Now, there was nothing made it feel phony or anything ridiculous right off the bat. But the fact that she goes over, picks up the picture, goes over and sits back down, and they don't even look over there, give you any camera shot of it, makes you go, huh, okay. And then they just decide to wait till the next day, which they meet some Navajo kid. I think he's one of the Navajo guys that run around with samurai swords and chase skinwalkers, because he was kind of dressed like them. I don't know. They do some funny videos and cool videos. And he must be like 8 feet tall compared to them, because it's like he's a giant looking down at them, which I thought was pretty funny. And so he's telling them about monsters, and this is a place where they kept the monsters, which is fine. You throw that whole legend myth thing in there, and then they decide, and then it's supposed to be the bunkhouse is supposed to be the hot spot now. So they're going to go do the bunkhouse. And I hate to be spoiling this for people, but if you watch it, you'll still be entertained by it. They go to the bunkhouse, and then it begins to just slide down. Heather brings some powders. And you think, because they showed him this picture, it looks like there's these hands and something had been on the table. So they go, and you see the table, and the table's not very big. And they were talking before like they were giant hands, but it doesn't look like it because the table's not even that big. But then she puts these multicolored powders out, like blue and yellow and red and violet, and you're like, okay. And you're trying to think, okay, they're going to use a ultraviolet camera, or there's some reason for this being different colors, like the rainbow all over this table, instead of just using white flour for impressions. And then they just decide to leave. Basically, it's like there's no provoking anything or something, or this demon or this entity or nothing. They just kind of go, let's go somewhere else. Actually, I think they did an EVP session, which we'll get back to that thing too in a minute. But they never really challenge. They go like, we'll come back later and see if something happens, and off they go. So they go to the hanging tree. They put up these lights. And they get out. And you have a cameraman behind the tree who moves around beside them at times, and then they have the static cam shot, and you know there's people there. And then they do this problem again with the cuts and things, and the cameraman's moving, and then nothing's really happens, and then they jump because they hear something inside the little building there. Well, the first thing would tell you is you'd be immediately, let's get in there and see what it was and investigate what could have moved. Did something fall? Is there an animal in there? What is it we heard? They don't do any of that. They just stand there and talk about like they're scared to go inside for a moment. And it kind of throws me off. Have you been able? No, we haven't been out on that trip yet. That is a future trip to go out and look for that, because I really want to this year put a pin in that one. But it's kind of weird because they get inside and they're talking, and they never really address that they heard this noise. They really don't. And I'm thinking, and then you hear what sounds, and to me it sounded like they said footsteps. It sounds like someone threw a ball on the roof and it went boom, 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 boom. Now, there's other people with them. It's a small room, so the one cameraman's in there with them, because you obviously, but there's an audio guy. The audio guy is somewhere close, near to them, so he's probably just outside the door. And there's probably a producer. There could be another camera guy. Who knows how many, but they never say anything like, hey, check out outside. Is there somebody on the roof? Is there something? Is there a branch hitting it? Blah, blah, blah. And they just stand there and let it be. And I'm like, okay, I'd want to go out and say, hey, is there something outside? But they don't. They just sit there and look. Oh. Now, the only other thing they really do is they go back to that dust, and nothing happened. And then they show later there's a shadow that hits there, but there's lights everywhere there at night. So someone could have been across the way some distance off and passed by one of the lights, and it put this big shadow on the building, so it's just kind of And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, you guys never really, you did it for like just for jumps and entertainment. You didn't do anything, it was like, man, why not? It would have made it kind of, because the picture was kind of cool. Well, they did this, the spirit box thing. And they have the spirit box, and I never thought about it till then, is they took the spirit box, and she does that thing where they plug into it with the headphones and puts a blindfold on. I have no idea why they put the blindfold on. Maybe it's for sensory deprivation to hear clear. I don't know. And Heather sits there with the earbuds in, or ear headphones. She was wearing headphones. And then the blindfold. And then Jack is going to ask questions. And she's going to answer them. And so there's no external noise going on other than Jack's voice. And she can't hear anything but what's coming through the spirit box. And that's the moment I realized, well, the spirit box has a library and they all have microphones on them, because that's how they react to noises and sounds and questions. And it just is a thing. Sorry. And so what's the purpose of her having the headphones on? Because the electronic box still can hear him. So they don't do the cuts then. But then I'm like, the whole time wondering, okay, can she hear? And they never play us a playback of what the spirit box, it sounds like. They didn't have that, like a split on it, so you could hear, occasionally show you what she was hearing compared to what she was saying. They just Jack talks, and she just basically almost immediately is always answering. So then you're just like, hold on a second, because that the electronic box that's kind of like AI can hear him. She can't, but it can. So it's kind of funny. It would be interesting, and I've thought about doing it, is if you reduce the noise in the room and do that more specifically, does it help it better? Now, of course, like the REM pods and all that, I always leave that out, because even you could tell with Jack and Heather in this episode, they're wearing walkie-talkies. I tried to look to see where the squelches were, because when you're filming, you want your squelch set on the walkie-talkie so nothing comes through while you're filming, because they're filming. They're not necessarily there to communicate. They're both in the room, right? But it was kind of funny, because every member of the group has a walkie-talkie. We did. The producers all had them. The audio guys had them. And in fact, what's crazy is everything we said on the microphone also came through headsets for a lot of these guys too. So everybody could hear everything, including what we were saying from some distance. They could hear the audio. They could hear the walkie-talkies. We could talk, but you always kept your squelch up. So if someone did something, you might hear it, or you might feel a buzz from it, but you didn't want it to break in, because we're all there, and there's not supposed to be other people there. So we don't need odd voices coming through. But if you take your walkie-talkie with a REM pod, or most electronic devices, you squelch it and you key it up, it sets things off. It can cause a lot of problems. Well, if you take it and you hit the button and you start swinging it around like this, or waving it in a circle, it'll make it go wee wee wee, which is the effects they get. Which I always have a problem of. We know the people are there. I used to like Ghost Hunters, because if you remember the very, very early episodes of Ghost Hunters, when they really started bringing a bigger crew out, you saw the film crew. You always saw them in the background. You could keep a head count, and you knew who was there. And they used walkie-talkies, and they were very clear and apparent about them, and they were not a big REM pod fest because of the interference because of them. I kind of always liked that, because it made me think, okay, there's a possibility they understand the corruption of evidence. You want a tighter seal about things. So that disappointed me, that their only time they do stuff is, well, you never see where the other guys are. And I've seen in a lot of these shows where they change the angle, and the camera shot that you just saw, well, there's a guy there, but he's not there anymore. And then you realize with the cut edits that you're not seeing real time what they're doing. And it's for entertainment. I get it. But it's disappointing. They did the Vulture Mine, and then of course Josh had to jump in with Jacob Waltz. There's a possibility it was the Vulture Mine he high graded, and I was like, okay, you guys killed me now. He just took, you guys were slowly making me, and that was it. Yeah, it kind of was. I thought was it sloppy, or have we gotten to the point where it's just like jump scare and entertainment, which is what I think a lot of the shows do. And I hate that because I like it, because my natural thing would be either something on the roof, somebody check outside, or call outside, key up that walkie-talkie. Of course you can't, because if you do, all the REM pods around you will go off. But do something to make it feel like you're actually investigating or paying attention to it. Now, I will give credit to Jack Osborne. I was kind of surprised. He never did the jump scare thing, even though if I meet him, I will say, why didn't you just walk out there with the doll? Is it because it would totally blow that story? It doesn't mean it ruins the story. It just means it didn't happen to you. But it would have been interesting to see him at least want to push the envelope with that. So that was my experience for that. There's not much else on anymore. We're kind of in that season. You have Oak Island, which every week is almost the same, even though they're digging under a big rock now, which they've done that before. So that's cool. But Gary's on there. Vanessa is not this season. They're not digging big holes. They're just digging the whole little holes. So they have to bring the pretty blonde girl in to dig the big holes. Otherwise, they have just the guys there to dig the little holes. And but they're like season 13. It's hard to believe that. 13 seasons of them digging holes. So shows you. But I think Gold Rush is way beyond that. They've got to be in 14, 15, 16 seasons of guys just bickering and chasing gold around. They come, they go. So, but I try to always. Part of the thing is viewership is so down on stuff, the new Nielsen ratings, that I still try to throw my time in, because I think it's important that they still have something out there, because then you'll have nothing, and then we're just going to have canned shows, and the canned shows are tough for me. Those are the worst ones. They're very sloppy. They kind of like and if you notice, a lot of the shows that run on a lot of the programs are older programs or older footage. They're just not putting the time and commitment in right now. Now COVID screwed things up, because it was a period where they couldn't do anything, very little new production, and I'm sure they're going to kick some, and we'll see some fresher stuff. But again, it's like, what is going to be the next kind of evolvement? Right now seems to be the celebrity host with a program, because that seems to be a big deal. But right now they were showing, I can't remember his name, Ben. I worked with him on a couple programs. Nice guy, real tall guy. But I can't remember Ben's last name. But anyways, he was really good. But he does those kind of shows where he's just the host guy. So, Shirley, stickler for detail. Well, I watch it because I want something to change my mind. I'm not trying to pick it apart. I'm actually looking at it going, okay, do that, because that's what I would do. I'd want to know. And then I'm just like, kind of, History Mysteries really screwed over the Lost Dutchman story. None of the other people had any Lost Dutchman history. They only had the history that the production company gave them. And they let me put together the Q&A and a lot of the background information. And then when I got there, only the guy from Pawn Stars was there. I didn't know who else was going to join in. And I asked them, I said, we going to have, who are we going to have in? Because I thought they would have some people with different opinions, but at least someone I heard of. And they it was kind of rough. And I you got to remember, I sat in that chair. It's a green screen room, and like a sound stage. But I sat in there probably for 2.5 hours. So there's a lot of material, but they bounce it around. And so a lot of times what you see is just a fraction, very, very tiny fraction of what you did. Beyond Oak Island, I'm just there at the front and back just a little. And I was out there for an entire day filming in California with them. And then I came in, and then they did hero shots and stuff with me out by the Superstitions, and they didn't use any of that. So it's up to them what they think. They like someone that you look at and say, oh, there's an academic guy. So they don't see me like you see. You see me, the Lost Dutchman guy knows the Lost Dutchman, does a YouTube channel, does all this. Most general public, let's face it, 98% of their audience does not know me for any of that. So they see me as, why is that guy on there? Where the others are, well, she's, an academic, and he's dressed and has a nice tie, and they think these guys know what they're talking about. Even though most of them probably didn't really know of the Lost Dutchman before they came in. They're just paid to come in and read scripts. So it's unfortunate. Got a little Parker thing there. It will be, it's becoming more and more AI. Yes, unfortunately. Just watch your show about finding the Jesuit cross. Real stories will come back around. Well, and that's one of the reasons I did this, is Frank was actually kind of instigating it. He calls them the stupid videos I do now, but Frank was a big part of it, of saying, you have all these treasure hunting files, you can do this for 20, 30 more years. You have unlimited resource, because these treasure hunt files cover the world. And he said, why don't you just start, you do the Superstition and Southwest stuff, but why don't you also pull some of these other stories in and let it be more, not generic, but more wide-ranging, which is why it's called Chasing Legends. And I thought it was a good idea, and we tested the waters, dipped our toes. Now, always the Superstition stuff gets the more views and is a little better, but it's worked out really well for us for content over a period of time. So yes, I will agree. Frank was right on that. He thinks it's stupid now, even though it was his idea. But the AI thing, I've thought of AI ideas. I joked with Trevor, if we had really good, and I don't think we have Clay Wurst, we have some things, but we don't have a ton of stuff of Rick Gwynn and Tom Collenborn and Dan Hopper. If we had really good, at least HD footage, it'd be great to see if we could put together something that does AI reenactment with them in it. Cool. Do something cutting edge, but then I realize it always looks hokey. It doesn't really breathe real. And then I'm just compounding the problem of what's coming, which is we're just watching and listening to stuff, and it's not really, real. I just finished reading Deep Fault, Ron's fictional novel. Is there really a mine shaft with the name of Bud Dunn carved in the ceiling? Probably, if you put it in the book. I would say that. It's been, God, I haven't read that since it came out, because I remember he did Deep Fault. What was the other one he did? He did Deep Fault. He did 2 fictional novels. And then he did his autobiography one. And then he did Crooked Mountain, which is kind of a, what do you call those? It's like Center's Gold. It's a novel, but it's based on true story, according to Ron. Then you got Zigzag Canyon. So there's 5 of them. I'm trying to remember what the other one is. It's not Deep Fault. Do you have old footage of Tom K? What we've released, what we've put out is in there. Whatever we've done of him sitting around, there's very little of it. I know there was the Bob Ward stuff in him. He filmed. Tom was a terrible cameraman with a VHS camera. Get on a horse and just bounce it. There's probably more as we go through things. It's just, and whenever we find stuff, we just put it together. When we think we have something worth watching, we put it out. But Tom was kind of resistant to the filming camera, I think. I know there was, and again, there's more footage of him non-Dutchman stuff, but there's the A&E program and our program. There's some stuff he did. So, but as far as, the outtakes, I tried to get what wasn't used, cutting room floor stuff, because they filmed Tom for they probably had 3-4 hours of footage of interviewing Tom at different spots, and they probably had about 6 or 7 hours of clay, and they even had some of John Wilburn, and none of that I was able to get a hold of. I said, you guys didn't use it, just, let me use clips of it and stuff of that they've done, but they will hold it, because let's just say something ever comes around and this whole thing gets hot. They have Tom's footage, they have Clay's footage, they have hours of stuff they can use. So yeah, Crooked Mountain was first, and then what was that other book that he did? He did 2 fictional novels, and Deep Vault was one. Can't remember the other one. Tom did Act for Justice, I know that, his novel. What really happened to the gold under Waltz's bed? Did it really exist? There was stuff, and did Dick Holmes really get that, or was he a player in helping to get that out? That's the hard thing to say, because Julia never addressed it, Reinhardt never addressed it, no one else really did. It was just Dick Holmes' story. We don't really know. That's the problem. We know he had Reinhardt retrieve what he had at the house, because I'm sure he was worried somebody would dig around there, find something, or it could be been exposed. And other than that, we don't know that much of that story. The problem being, now who knows, maybe the Spanglers have far more stuff in depth. And that was the reason when you watch the videos, and I was so interested in those Patrash letters initially. But yeah, it was I was really, really interested in what other information that we would today, that was kind of violent, but more information we would look at today as, interesting to us and help clarify things as compared to back then. Back then, I'm sure Jim Bark and Sim Zealy asked other questions about certain things, and we get almost none of that. Today we would have, we could sit down and waltz for 6 hours and not run out of questions, not even talking directly about the mine, because I don't think he, other than probably telling them what, the activity at the mine initially, and I'll remember he was never taking them to the mine initially, so most of the discussion would not have been of what was happening at the mine. But what about Double Cross? Someone nailed it, yeah. The other book was Double Cross. And I think that's the one where, is that the one where he's the secret agent? I don't know. Double Cross, yeah. I got that one. I'm trying to remember if I ever read it, because there were so many books coming out, and there was one of them, and I'm pretty sure I read Deep Vault, but not Double Cross. It's where Ron Feldman's a secret agent. Man, Jax, you're getting on my nerves. Any updates on the missing metal detect equipment from when you... No, nobody will ever know what happened to that. The guys that know what happened to that aren't talking. They paid Magnuson finally. That kind of dropped a weight on the show. Made us look ridiculous. Made everybody look... made the production company and Magnuson look stupid. I can tell you this. When I came out, it was not where it was, and then the story changed to... we took it and we left it on the bank. We were out down there. After everybody had left, we were the last ones out, and we didn't see it there. Magnuson was with me. We certainly didn't see it. So where was it? You were hiding it from us? And then they claimed, and then the next story was it was washed out into the lake. And then later, after that happened, months later, some of it turned up at a pawn shop. And then that was... so there you go. There was no real provenance to the matchbooks then. It's... As far as provenance that the ore was sent out, there's people have different disputes over it. It was from ore that was shipped out of Phoenix. That was reputed to be Waltz's. Some of it Waltz's ore was part of that. There are a few people that say that it is different. It doesn't have the green-hued gold that the Superstitions generally have because of copper deposits and the silver in it. They feel that might have been mixed up with a different gold, because there's other pieces that reflect more of the Superstition variety. I don't know. I've been fortunate to have a number of different things in my hand and look at them and say, yeah, there's a, but it's hard to tell how they cleaned up and when they cut them and when they put them together. I tend to think, it's what's it going to do? The matrix of it on an XRF is just however you move the XRF, you can make it more like or less like by movement. So there's not much you can do to that. But it's different, the analysis of it was it's different, and from what they were able to tell from that and some other pieces was not from a known mine. So it's not the vulture, it's not the mammoth. That was basically the distinction on those things. The trilogy, I don't know about the trilogy. The singly might be even difficult. Someday I will have to set the time aside and do that. But that's what these videos kind of do in some respects. But it allows open discussion, us to get in each other's heads and talk about this stuff. Have you heard anything new about with Victoria Peak? No, I put out a word on some of the stuff I had because I found an additional manuscript. So I have 2 unpublished manuscripts and more photos I found. And I talked to some people that know kind of the inner circles, inner groups of Victoria Peak. And what I was trying to do by doing that was to find out, what did I have? Is this common stuff? What is it? And I described some of the pictures because they're first generation pictures. I'm sure they came from the family during that time period. And so I wanted to know. I didn't think it was anything to solve the mystery, but I wanted to know if it was invaluable to anybody who was writing books or working on any programs. And nothing came of it still. So I always kind of, because I don't know, I was just fortunate to run into and have continued to run into all kinds of pretty cool stuff in these treasure hunting files. So I always, unlike a lot of other people, I just share stuff and tell people. And I was very fortunate. I went through, and the first thing I found was the manuscript by Doc Noss's stepdaughters. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool because I recognize the names. And and then I found some articles that had been written by Xanthus Carson, and I had the typed versions, and then I had the magazines with the articles, published articles, and then I had the photographs, and then I found another manuscript, and I found the court hearing report, which is very thick. And was looking through that, which is kind of interesting, of Doc Noss when he was shot. And then I found this other manuscript, and then I found another envelope with photos in it that didn't have anything written on it. It was just a little smaller manila envelope, and I looked inside and was like, oh, pictures. And I always like pictures, and then I'm looking on the back of them first to see if they have labels, and then no. And then I realized, oh crap, this is a picture of Doc Noss dead on the bumper, which it wasn't. The usual one is the one from, I guess it'd be his right side, and this was one from his left side, showing his face laying there after he'd been shot. Do you think that's the same as the LDM? No, I do not. I do not in any way. I think the Lost Doc Thorne mine, there's a lot of problems with that story, and we addressed it in a video. A lot of people have kind of felt that was a story that became kind of part of the LDM culture. And it never was about a mine. It was about ore found in a specific spot, or gold. We did that video about the timeline of it and stuff. The person, unfortunately, and if I find his files as material on it, we'll do another video on it, was Thomas Glover. Really, really chased that story hard. And he found nothing to connect it to the LDM, I believe, in the end. And he had a lot of material concerning it. And we have a lot of his notes. His notes are going to be difficult to go through, but we have his notes now and how he was tracking things down. And so, instead of just a page or something about it, now you might have all the material he was pulling together and the resources. So we'll see how that works out. I believe your Christmas story about Walt's Julia is the most accurate. Well, you know what? I believe it's the most accurate. It's the one Julia Reinhardt talked about. So we know they knew Waltz. There is no doubt they knew Waltz. So just the fact that Julia's mentioned the paper having cared for Waltz, and Reinhardt's brother is buried directly next to Waltz in a Petrash family plot, tells you that connection. So It would have been nice if someone would have said him, and that's the thing we always have to look at is people tend to look at it as like, I want to know the story of this. Okay. But they want to know, where's the mine? Where did he say the mine was? How far did, And they ask certain things without trying to get too detailed, like right on the spot, without going outside and coming back in on the story, which, if you wanted to talk to Reinhardt and Julia today, we still probably would initially make the same mistakes, but you'd want to talk to them about the first time he talked about it. Was it just a briefer story? Did he talk much in depth on the camp or the traveling to the camp, or did that come in the weeks later after this? What, you would want to know certain things. How long did he say you were going to have to be shut down at the store to do this? It was just going to be a couple days, huh? Okay. There could have been things that you would learn a lot about of where they were traveling, how long they would be gone, and they probably would have freely spoken of it. They may have, and Jim Bark just held them back. I don't think they asked a lot of the right questions, because when you look at where they searched and how they spread the search out, it didn't make a lot of sense at times, because I just don't believe Julia Waltz did not want anybody to be suspicious of what they're doing, where they're traveling. So Julia Reinhardt and Waltz disappearing. Waltz could have disappeared, but Julia closing the store and her and Reinhardt disappearing would have made people inquire what's going on. So I think it was shorter than we think. It probably wasn't just a day or something or two, but I don't think it was as long as sometimes the search that Ely and Bark, I think they failed to understand, is how long would it take Julia Reinhardt and Jacob to get to these places, to arrive, get the wagon out, travel there, and all this? How many days, how much time are we looking at? And we lost a lot of that, because in the modern era now, we know what the trails are like and so forth, but we don't know what it was like traveling in and out of town, how long it took them. And it's not just Waltz at 80 years old, it's Reinhardt and Julia. Remember Reinhardt, they're riding in a wagon, but then Reinhardt's walking. And I'm sure he walked plenty, but how durable were they? Any dates finalized for the rendezvous? No, dates are not final for the rendezvous. Like I said at the top of the show, I have to kind of settle the dates, make sure the dates are good, and then I got to get the permit from the approval of the permit for the Forestry Service to announce them. So I'm going to wait on that. All right, just describe this show. Authentic and interesting. What? AI might authentic and interesting. Guy sits in a room with guitars and multiple keyboards. Talks about lost mines. I got to get a double rack for over here. So, but it does look cool. I guess the optic of this now, with all the guitars in the background and having two sets of keyboards on either side, is kind of cool. So I didn't think about that look it would have. It's just generally it's easier for me working to turn from side to side and work on stuff right now. It will be easier with a double rack, because yes, they're actually, yeah, it will. But yeah, and I've just been working on that stuff the last couple of days, off and on, putting things together, just doing interesting things. One of the fun things, whether it's film, I'm sure the filmmakers feel this way too, is in music, is just purely just sit down, open something up now. It's so much easier. You don't have to wind the tape, set the tape up, and all this. You're not wasting tape. Just sit there and then just let whatever ideas happens, and just see what it builds to. And the one thing I love about Pro Tools is, once it starts getting off the loop, I can start cutting the other stuff out, because I suddenly do something I think is pretty cool, and I can change. I can just delete what I was doing and keep the part that was cool, and then you end up with something kind of fun and nice. But yeah, most of the time anymore, I would say 100%, my own shits and giggles of just saying, I wonder how I could layer and do this, what this would sound like. And then I just do things that just sound like fun. Like the other day I was like, I want someone to walk around the room, walk around me and hear it, walk around me and then go out the door. And the door shut. And I did that. And it was so cool because I was like, man, that was cool that I was able to just kind of work that out where you can hear the person walk around behind you on the headphones and out and then close the door and leave the room. That was cool. I liked doing that. So that's always that fun. And Tyler's really into that. My Trevor's brother, my other son, but Tyler's into sound design. And I do like that stuff on the sound design of where it's just flat sound, but you can make it, when you close your eyes in your head, do a lot. Did anyone find the Victoria gold bars the rest down the road from the peak? Not that we know of. There's people that have claimed they've found something or this or that. It's like the DeGrazia paintings or anything else. Some people will speak of something and nothing happens. I will have to, for next week, grab that picture. It's of gold bars, some various gold bars from Victoria Peak, and they're different ones, different types. Shows a bit of the mix that was in there that was taken out. They're black and white photos, of course, but I did find that, and someone told me picture of one of them they'd seen, but it was like an isolated picture of that one out of the picture, and I have the picture that shows all three. And I have not taken the time to go through the book to see if all the pictures, because like I said, I got a bunch of pictures and stuff, and I'm sure everybody doesn't want to use every picture so in the book, but they are interesting pictures. Once I get the idea down how to do certain things, one of the things Trevor and I wanted to do is have a scanner where we could scan a lot of this stuff and put stuff up and have files that I would be able to access here. So if we're talking about a subject matter, I could go to that file, and while you're listening to me talk, I could go through and then talk about some of the pictures I've found in these files and stuff. Again, what does every cabinet have? Probably 200, 300, 400 files, and it's 5 drawers. So just start adding up the numbers, and there's 6 cabinets. The amount of information I've looked in all the cabinets, all the drawers, but I've only been through 2 drawers out of all that. So we're talking 30 drawers. I've been through 2 pretty well. The rest of it I've just kind of glanced in and looked at. I have not been through, and I'm always finding stuff, because once you pull out if you pull out a group of files, you'll find stuff underneath them and stuff. There was a box of stuff too, and there was a Rolodex of some sort, and I've never went back through those. So there's a bunch of stuff. What was overthrown of the crown? I do not know. I don't know what happened to the armor. Say that a Mexican guy in New Mexico had it. Tony something. I was curious if the stuff at Shoes, because Shoes said he bought his armor, Spanish armor, from a guy in New Mexico. I wondered if that was the same, and that Tony, whatever his name is, sold it to Shoes, but it's not. They're 2 different sets of armor, but similar, but not the same set. I do not know. That would be for one of the Victoria Peak guys. I wonder if Frank Fish knew about it. I'm sure he did. I don't know. I don't have the book. I know his book's over here. I don't know where it's at, but I'm sure it's in his one book, because he talks about every treasure. He has a book that's just about treasure tales, and he doesn't give you much insight to them. He just gives you the idea of them. It's like an index of treasure sites. So he has that book. So it's probably in there. I'll have to look, but I'm pretty sure it is, because it was a pretty popular one. And that story was out by then. It was a pretty popular story, so I'm sure Fish knew. And he probably, he always tried to introduce himself and get involved, because he was pretty successful in a number of different areas working with people. So he might have kind of, but they probably didn't find anything interesting. And he was a writer of magazine articles. That's the one thing. I know he wrote magazine articles. They're just few and far between. And because he usually wrote articles about places that he found, or he specifically dug, that he found that no one else had worked. So, nice to get that. We got to do the bobs because I'm drying out here. Yeah, time's going along. But yeah, I'm sure Fish knew about it. Was he deep into it? Because there was a lot of controversy around that too. And I don't know if he liked drama, because that's the one thing you hate with a lot of these stories is the drama that surrounds them and the drama with the people. There was 2 or 3 stories around here that I might have given him more of a look to, but the people and the stuff was so overly dramatic. I did not want to go to any part of it. I just wanted to just be out of that, There's I see that Larry showed up late. There's a penalty. Have a copy of the book that I bought back in the 1980s. Yeah, he's got the one book that has it talks a little bit about treasure hunting, and then it's just a list of treasure sites. Clay Wurst said that he had down to under half miles with his area's interest. It was he was really into out by Pistol Canyon area of Peters Mesa. Every 5 or 10 years, he'd have it narrowed down a little more, and I don't know if he just said that or he really believed it, but he was really really kind of focused on one spot. And I know there was another spot he was interested in that he talked about a bit, but I would like to know, because Clay was all over different areas before a certain period of time, and then Brownie took him to a different spot, and then someone else kind of pulled him into a different area. But he got into a spot, and he couldn't shake that spot. A lot of people have been through it, and he picked a particularly rough area. But my thought process was between him, Crazy Jake, and a number of other people. They were up there so much. How come they could not figure it out, this specific area? Because he really, I believe he told me it was within a half mile or quarter mile, square quarter mile or half mile he had it down to. And that was probably around 2009, 2010, 2011, in that time period. And by that point, he wasn't going in the mountains, so that was kind of in it. What's the LDM supposed to look like? It's a pit, but it's covered, so it's a covered pit, so it should be a depression. I saw a model by his grave that it's a pit mine. It's supposed to be a funnel, like the big end open at the top, and it's on a slope and an arroyo. So it would go down and it angles back, and Walt said when you drop into it, it's like a funnel pit, but as you go down in it, it starts to turn and it follows the vein. So it'd be just an open pit. But people have said, one, it was covered, and then other people say it's just the natural, if you're in a lot of those arroyos up in those higher mountain elevations in the Superstitions, stuff's dumping down into them, so it could have been filled by that. I would think there would be a depression or something, and other things possibility. It would be difficult to point out. Okay, it's supposed to be, and I saw a model. I don't know about the model by his grave. I've been there. Went to the dedication of the new one. I don't know if that was... maybe Dutch hunters need to feel they're making progress. I think it's that, and why would you keep coming over if you realize the person's not really searching or has any new information? I just like talking to Clay, so I knew he wasn't going out. I knew he was thinking about stuff, and, hey, who knows? Some guy in his bathroom, might be sitting on the toilet one day and come up with something in his head that we've never thought of. You never know what people might think or come up with, so... yeah, generally Dutch hunters, as they get older, Clay was a bit of an exception. They usually try to pinpoint it and say it's been found, or I believe it really was this all along, or that. They tend to do that, then keep pushing that thing. But I don't think anybody's really followed up Clay's stuff since he quit going in the mountains. There's a couple of people that act like they do, but I don't think anyone's been out there. I believe that if anyone could have found the mine, it would have been Jim Bark. Well, Sims Ely. Bark was more studious, was not a real outdoorsy guy, but Sims Ely was kind of rough and tough kind of guy. So their partnership was that, and it's surprising that Sims Ely and Bark, their partnership, which was probably about 15, 20 years, it's surprising that they probably found a lot of stuff that we do not know of. That's the weird part. When Bark wrote his manuscript, it covers a lot of different stuff. I'm sure him and Sims Ely found a lot of stuff that we still don't know about, because they weren't going to talk about Indian ruins and other stuff they found. So, and I'm sure Gus Barkley would have had a hell of a book. Really appreciate y'all working with the youngsters down at the Dons. The legend must live. Well, would he be there? I don't think so. I haven't heard from him. He might. I will catch up with him and see the availability of him. He's always welcome to go out there and help us. Frank doesn't like children. Frank doesn't like crowds. Frank doesn't like working with other people. Frank doesn't play well. Frank has been out there. There was a time Frank, Woody, and myself, all three, worked out there on that. So they're always more than welcome. It's just cold. It's the winter, so it's cold. You're dealing with cold water, and you got to deal with kids off and on, and there's usually 5 to 6 groups that you're dealing with for 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. You can't really teach them, and that's one of the big problems. You can't teach the kids the mind goal. You're just trying to entertain them, give them some possibilities, let them kind of get excited, and then maybe they kind of go, hey, this is cool, I want to learn more. So that's what you're trying to entice. But yes, Woody's been out there, Frank's been out there, and I've been out there. We've all three been out there together at times. How exactly did the Lost Dutchman come upon his gold in the Superstition, as far as you know? The best way I think about it is he ran into someone that knew where that stuff was. He wasn't just randomly exploring the superstitions, because his own way of talking about it was, it's not a place you would look. You wouldn't prospect there. Miner wouldn't look there. Cowboy wouldn't look there. It was in a ridiculous place. So if that's the truth, then that would make sense that someone else, Peralta's, Gonzalez, take your pick, had knowledge of that. Now, there's the other stories about him working a placer and all this. This wasn't really placer stuff they had initially, and the problem with the placer story is that would be kind of the generic story you would hear from anyone else. They were looking at placer and chased the placer up. I don't think he did. I think there was a mine, and he was just working a mine that had been abandoned. And there's a lot of old mines up there, so he just worked one that was abandoned that was still had really, really good ore that never got worked. Problem is, we've never found that diary journal or anything preceding him that makes us feel that really could be the case. So you have to take Petresh and Julia Thomas's word and Bark's word to some degree. If Walt said no miner cowboy mine, how did he get to it? Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure someone was there that connected him to it. His story was, it was a guy named Peralta, and there was a Peralta that was associated with the Peraltas with the Valencia mine, which a lot of people try to grab that, but Peralta's like Smith, so you can know multiple Smiths. We have a period of a year or two where Waltz is just a ghost in the wind. We don't know where he exactly was and what he was doing. He suddenly is not filing claims and this and that, and then he just suddenly, after a period of being in the wind, he appears living in Phoenix. So what he was doing during that period, there's a lot going on there. Area where the problem with the Gonzalez stories is and there was Gonzalez that came in and met with Al Morrow. The Gonzaleses, there was a group of the Gonzaleses were supposedly cousins, family, friends with the Peraltas. That's the Roos story, and so many other stories. Frank Fish believed that story, and it seems that there was some Gonzalez family members that came in the mountains about some mines. It's how do those two things connect? The problem is a lot of these families didn't keep the best of records, and a generation of slippage, and suddenly 2-3 generations later, you don't know why. You just know the family had mines out here, and you don't have any backstory to it, and that's kind of where all that ended up. Plus, you have to understand that the change from Mexico and the area of Arizona, from Spain to briefly Mexico, then to the United States, and then it just, there was so much turnover and change, and people having to move about, and then people trying to be quiet about stuff because they weren't sure, and that kind of says truth to some of with Walt's, of the whole thing of him being a naturalized citizen. And it's a very odd thing because he was a naturalized citizen, and if Peralta was worried about any claimant to the mine or any problem with the mine, having a couple guys that were naturalized citizens of the U.S. there would have helped him out. So it's a weird piece of the story that people will be disinterested in, and Dick Holmes had no idea because he said Waltz was not a citizen, which he was. But it's one of those things that kind of makes not only sense, but works to the degree, and it has truth about it. Jacob Waltz was an American citizen, naturalized, and he had his papers. What do you think about the Walker Weed map? I'm never sure about that. I'm never quite sure about that one. I don't know, and it's so indefinite to me. The big problem I have maps, watch that video I did on maps, because they can be interesting, but you don't know where to even start with them. Wait till you get back to in Arizona, Bob. Oh, you're talking to Bobby. Okay, I didn't even see him there. Oh, there he is. If you're looking volunteers, I'll be Friday. Yeehaw. Well, there, you can see Bobby can come out and hang out. Here's a photo. There, I think you're saying there is a photo of a model by this grave. Yeah, I don't know. There's a group, the Historical Society, the cemetery, and then there's a Lost Dutchman motorcycle club chapter that had a lot to do with that. And I don't know. We were the Dons were part of that, and initiated. And then the Dons showed up. Myself, Trevor, and Greg Davis went out there and took part in the ceremony, and we got commemorative coins from it, which was very, very cool. Thank you to the Lost Dutchman Motorcycle Club, because they minted those coins and were handing them out to their members only and stuff. And then Greg went over and asked if we could get some, and they gave Trevor, myself, and Greg each one. Very, very, very nice guys. Very, very nice. And very cool to hang out with them and get to know them and spend that day with them. Is it possible Waltz found a large cache? Well, but the story doesn't make sense, because then he says there was caches and he buried them near the camp. You can't find. He was going to show him the mine, so there was a mine attached somewhere near. How close? We don't know, to his camp. So the story makes sense. They have a camp. They travel over to the mine. They kept the camp a little distance away, and I think, well, I don't remember the exact ins or outs, but I think because of the mine situation, someone could creep up on you or something. It was not a good place to be by yourself, because you could be ambushed there easily. And I think Walt said his partner said he'd stay in camp and work on the ore, because that would just allow them to get ahead more while Waltz was gone. It works as a story. I mean, we still don't have Jim Bark's actual material that he wrote out. So, and he didn't use a ghostwriter, so we would think most of it's pretty close to what he said. Which, by the way, you always, if you ever when you read the Bark stuff and you say Helena, it was Helena, or Helen, was Reinhard Petrascha's mom's name. So it could have also been, knowing Reinhard and Gottfried and Herman, that Jim Bark, because he knew Julia, because we know he knew who Julia was, because in all the letters he recalls her Julia. But for some reason, that manuscript, there might have been the problem, the brain fart at one point, and he referred to Julia as Helena, which is Reinhardt's mother. So, if you were saying here is a photo of the model by his grave, yeah, you can't see that. I have pictures of it, though. We were out there. Seems to me like the Lost Dutchman story is like choice of its kind. Well, that's the weird part about it, is there was actually people alive, people that knew some of the people, and people just didn't ask the question. I think everybody always thought with Lost Mine and those type of stories is like, yeah, it's bullshit. Yeah, he's full of crap. And then they didn't listen, and that was one of the things that Herman talked about, is people don't listen to me when I tell them something. When the interview comes out, it's different than what I told them. Reinhardt, I heard from someone said he would start talking to someone, and if they seemed to be listening, he would start to talk to them at depth, but then they would start to point out and be counterproductive by trying to correct him what they'd read or something, and then Reinhardt would just shut down and be like, hey. And I was there for just a similar situation with Tom Colliborn. Joe Roboto kept correcting Tom, and then Tom finally just said, yep, Joe, I guess you're right. You know more than I do about it. And Tom just quit talking, and that happens. I've seen it happen, and I'm sure it happened with those guys. There was more they could have told. No one ever thought about going to Reinhardt Petrash and say, hey, tell us some of the stories Jacob Waltz told you about him traveling, blah, blah, blah. And nobody thought about doing that, and that would have been interesting, because you would have got to hear a little more about Waltz, maybe some places he traveled and stuff, and that would have made it even more interesting. So the story's great, but the people were so focused on certain things, and again, when they would question people, they would be dismissive of stuff. Everybody was dismissive of Reinhardt Petrash because he didn't know. One of the things I read once was a bunch of people were very, very critical of him because he didn't seem to know the difference between chalcedony and real hard quartz. And he really would get excited about chalcedony deposits. Reinhardt mined much of his later life, worked in mining camps, and his dad and brother worked as miners in mining camps before him and after. I'm sure he had a good knowledge, at least a decent knowledge. But who knows what he knew that Waltz had talked to him. Maybe the chalcedony was a very important clue. And you make fun of the guy, and then the guy just quits talking about it. So maybe it was an area, and it was a quartz and rock and quartz vein and all this, but maybe the area was littered with chalcedony, which prospectors would just be dismissive of. It's quartz, but you don't find you're not going to find it in the chalcedony, and they would be dismissive of it, which they were of Reinhardt. And maybe Reinhardt was saying something that we should have paid attention. You don't know, because then nobody was like, hey, Reinhardt, man, yeah, I know you're really interested in this chalcedony field. I found one. And then kind of find out why, but nobody cared. Most Dons were very intelligent, well-to-do. They knew some... Oh, the Dons? Yeah. The early Dons? Yes. Well, you got to remember, they were... Robert Hanley was the professor of mathematics at one of the junior colleges. And they had PhDs and masters. They were attorneys. They were pretty intellectual bunch to one degree, but then intellectuals back in those days were also kind of guys that would go roughhouse it in the mountains. So you have to look at it's a different time and era. They weren't... Today you look at the academic guy with the button-up shirt and the tie. They went out in the mountains and they had button-up shirts and ties, and they're out there in boots and hats, and they're out there just in the middle of nowhere. And you're like, that's weird, because I didn't... But it was a different time, and the difference between living in the rough and living like we do today, there's such a huge difference between that now as in back then. You could be well-to-do and live in a very nice house, and you might be very fortunate to have indoor plumbing or something, but you weren't that far separated from the neighbor down the street. Everybody wasn't taking a shower or a bath every day. We live a far more comfortable, cleanly life than they did then. So those guys were a bit more rugged about stuff, and they got by, and they dealt with... Remember, think about this. A lot of those Dons working in office buildings and stuff, and they had fans, and there was the introduction of swamp coolers, but it was not that cool. So those guys were working in a very, very difficult position. Working indoors isn't necessarily that much better than working outdoors in the summer if you don't have AC. So yeah, they were a rugged group. They were a smart group, and that might be the book in the end I might tell, is because of just that history of not just the club, but the individuals that formed that club and for so long did all that. So what does all the stories about Walt's killing his nephew? That's just a Dick Holmes story, and all those different men try to hide the mine location, being like a typical kind of hermit assassin mine. But that's just made up. I mean, it's just, I think, Dick Holmes going out and he couldn't find the mine, but he could find the nephew with the chain around his neck, right? Nobody ever thought of that. He's finding these things, and it's like, and then they have the skull, and then they claim this and they claim that, and it's the Dick Holmes story itself is just basically hinges on whether you want to believe Dick Holmes without any documentation or evidence of the sort. And that's the problem, is you run into that. We gotta have to close up here because it is grocery night, remember. That was a good question, though. It's, but again, that was one of the things I talked about. I did a video and I did a lecture about, was the murderous Jacob Waltz. Got a lot of attention, but my whole idea was I would bring everybody in and then try to point out, is he really that guy? That became a story. He's the murderous Jacob Waltz. People were trying to follow him in the mountains. We find no evidence of that in newspapers. The newspapers, nobody seemed to know he had a mine when he died. That came out after Julia's looking for it. So there's a whole different version of him, and he doesn't seem to be like this assassin for hire or anything like that. He just seems to be this old guy who just lived on his own, and nobody seemed to be afraid of him or any problem or suspicious of him. And then afterwards, people who didn't know him created a mythology about him. So I think that's the best way to say it, which happens. So all the stories just came after his death. Some of all the old Dons vids are amazing. Yeah, just looking at some of what they did. Imagine before they had the mechanical way to put the charcoal up for firefall when they were hauling it up there by hand. Just think of that. Businessmen and bank presidents and all these guys. And these guys were hauling stuff up. It's pretty incredible. You're just thinking, man, those guys put something into it. There's Sir Duck. Yeah, and I didn't see you in there earlier at all. So thank you, everybody, for coming with us. Hey, Dallas. Dallas is there, and Dallas just joined. I don't know. We can't move it back much later to catch you guys and make it easier. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Kind of turned around. Got a little reviewer there at the beginning. And hopefully people will watch the show next week. We can talk a little people's thoughts and feelings. Do we want more entertaining television, or do we want something that is reflective of kind of our own investigative, abilities? It's like, well, I would go look at that. I would think this. I think we generally all say, you hear something bang over there, you go to look and see what it is. You don't run away. But yeah, stay safe. Everybody have a good time. Have a great weekend. It's going to be cold out here. Pat's for Jax. Yeah, it's Jax, Jaks. But yes, I will be forever correcting that his entire life. But Jackson is his full name, and it's Jakson. After Jackson Spires of Blackfoot, the drummer, the Thunderfoot. So that's how he's named. But anyways, I don't know. He just disappeared. Oh, he's asleep. He's behind me out like a light. He's snoring back there. I guess it was too much for him. So little Jax is out like a light. Oh, he's up. I just saw him moving. Yeah. Oh, that's Rocky. Rocky came in and he woke Jax up. So there you go. That's Rock. All right. So everybody have a great rest of the week. Great weekend. We will catch you on Chasing Legends on Mondays, and we will catch you again at Live. Live might be tricky because we're going to run into Discovery Camp, and I got to be shooting in for those. We might do some on the road live. We'll see how it all works out. We'll try to do that. Maybe I'll have Trevor come in and sit in. That might be fun because he's not nearly as knowledgeable as me, and he could be very, very confused. But it might be worth a chuckle or two. So he's been there later. Enjoy. Okay, I don't know who it was. Got that Barry Goldwater campaign sticker for you, my wife. Who works his campaign. I just ran into a picture. Yeah, he was a Don, and then he became an honorary Don, and the Dons followed him around. Um, yeah, you have to email to the website. Trevor will catch on that. But yeah, I just ran a picture the other day where the Dons were carrying and going around the state up in Prescott and stuff. And they were doing all this stuff to support Barry's campaign to become senator, because it did them well to have a state or United States senator on board with the Dons, which they had state senators and House reps and mayors, but having a United States senator was a big deal for them. And he did give talks. He would come in town, and then he would come to the Dons meeting and give a talk occasionally, as a member of the Dons. So it's all very cool. Anyways, we will finish and drive this out. I need an outro, but we don't have an outro, so this will be the outro. Is thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the week. Hope you stay warm and everybody's good. May all your journeys out in the mountains or wherever you're going be safe, and we will talk to you later next week. Adios, amigos.